I think we should have organized the order differently. If this was like the Ghost of Christmas Present we just watched, I'm kind of like the ghost from Christmas Past. So we at CCP have been doing VR for a bit, and I was maybe hoping to share a little what we have learned and our kind of own, in a way, emotional journey through it. And I think a lot can be learned from that, because I don't think it has changed that much in the years we have been doing it, even though VR is going to come or going to start and it's going to be permanent from next year. I think still a lot of the similar things will apply. So just a little bit about CCP. We're a company that got started in Iceland in '97. We have offices in 4 locations around the world. In Reykjavik, where we started, in Atlanta, in Newcastle, and Shanghai. We have about 300 employees worldwide, most of which are either working on our first game, EVE Online, or some of our VR projects. And here's a kind of a little timeline of the company. So we start very early in Iceland, like I said, the age of innocence, where actually the game or the company gets its start by making a family board game, which ultimately tested a lot of the theories that were put into EVE Online, which is all about the game should be about playing the players and not about the game. And then we spent 3 years to make EVE Online from 2000 to 2003. And just to give you a sense of what it was back then, I think we had about 35 people on the team that made EVE Online. And when the game came out, nobody on the team had made a game before. And it's even to the point most people on the team have never even seen a game developer from afar. So nobody in Iceland had made a game, and we didn't travel so much because we were locked in a basement finishing EVE Online. So as a kind of result to that, there are many kind of weird and quirky things in EVE that have dictated a bit how that experience is quite different. I'm sure you have heard all the stories of like somebody presses the wrong button in EVE Online and voila, 10,000 people wait for 7 days and $30,000 of spaceship equipment get lost, and people cut power cords and do satellite images of their enemy and call riot police and God knows what. So it's a game of a bit of an epic proportion. And we go through a very kind of classical journey of a company that kind of accomplishes the impossible, which was putting together a single-threaded, massively multiplayer MMO. We thought we could do anything. So from the sort of period of 2008 to 2013, we kind of were in the mindset of starting up a lot of projects. We put some massive ambition in place, and we're actually now coming out from under it, where we have kind of had to undo our own kind of initial, slightly juvenile biases, which are kind of painful to do as you have to go through them. But they have actually been quite helpful to kind of brace yourself for the disruption that is VR. So we have this as the mission of our company, to create virtual worlds more meaningful than life. This is actually something we wrote down in 2008, and we've been in an internal argument of the company of what it exactly means. And is it evil or is it good? We're, of course, putting it out there to do something good. This is in a different way explaining what is gamer utopia, like Jesse Snell talk about. And I'll talk a bit about that later, but I'm going to sort of focus on our journey in VR. So I actually started, even before I started CCP, we had a company in Iceland called Oz, which was making one of the first VRML browsers back in sort of 95 till 98. That was the thing, where the internet was supposed to be 3T. We were all living in snow crash and all that. And here's a picture of us in the Blue Lagoon in Iceland. We look like a teenage rock band, which we kind of were. That company actually blew up. And here's kind of a trace of the cluster effect of when you have a startup in a kind of a primitive economy in many ways, as Iceland was at the time. There are hundreds of companies that can really trace their lineage to this first company that was doing VR, as we knew it at the time, virtual reality modeling language. There we have the street from Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, We have space stations with dancing avatars and all that. We even had it motion captured across the internet. We did concerts where we motion captured a singer, broadcasted it throughout the world from New York, God knows what, back in '98. At the time, the country itself was connected to the internet with a modem. So when you showed up early in the morning, you had to wait while the country dialed in until you could do internet stuff. So that company was about 50 years too early. I still think this is going to happen, but maybe another kind of example of what it means to be too early. But we're kind of this sort of involvement with VR started for CCP. I actually dug up the email for this show. So this is from August 24, 2012, where I noticed the Kickstarter for Oculus. And I sent out an email to a few CCPers, kind of tentatively, yeah, we should maybe use 20% to maybe get some kits and see what out, and maybe we put it at our fan event, which we hold every year. So the first question, I think it's good for everyone to ask themselves before they get involved in it, because it's still, in many ways, too soon. Are you, or as I'm asking in the show, am I passionate about VR? So my answer to that question was kind of obvious. I started dreaming about this when I was a teenager. And as soon as I tried the first DK1s, then it's like, okay, it could actually happen. But I also thought, okay, so I'm a CEO of a company, so that might not necessarily be a good thing that I'm passionate about VR, because I am actually not going to be hands-on making a game. And if there's anything I know from running companies, which I've now done for more than a few decades, is that you self being passionate about it, you can't really bottle that up and put it in a Kool-Aid bottle and then feed it to somebody and they become passionate about it. So really, for this to work, you need to find somebody else, that is if you're the CEO, that is also passionate about this. And we actually had quite a bit of people at CCP that were passionate about VR. This group of people in particular, they had actually backed personally the Kickstarter for Oculus back in the day. And they banged out together something amazing, which was called EVR at the time, which was this extremely simple prototype of basically being a fighter pilot inside Online, which, if you kind of know what EV is about, it's kind of abstract, it's kind of slow-paced, it's kind of third person, so it's not very sort of immersive, doesn't really fulfill on the fantasy of being sort of jettisoned out of the tube and going into space and having a really visceral experience. But they hammered that out. I remember trying it in the CCP kitchen for the first time. And there was this very distinctive moment where it's kind of, okay, they made a spaceship fighting game. I could kind of imagine what that was. But when I tried it out and I looked down at my body, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not the clothes I put on this morning. And then I kind of felt this kind of immediate presence. And it's quite powerful when you try that for the first time, because you can kind of simulate everything else in your head. But when you actually feel like you're there, it's, there's something truly powerful about it. So, okay, we have here a passionate group of people that have broken every single rule that we have at the company on how to get projects started, how to not do your day job. There were even people at the company helping to do their day job so they could do the game. So we were kind of, okay, we have passionate people. Let's see if we can take it further. And we took it to our fan event, which is an interesting thing. About 2,000 people fly to Iceland every year to come and celebrate internet spaceships. I could tell many speeches about that. But we showed it to our kind of most passionate users. And it was just uniformly, you could see every single EVE player, when they took the headset off, you could see kind of the bonfire of 1,000 suns behind their smile. And they all just said kind of spontaneously, please take my money. And okay, we've kind of done a user market study. People are willing to pay for this. So, okay, so we have, I'm passionate about it. There are other people passionate about it. Our core users are passionate about it. But that's all these kind of concentric circles are full of biases. So we kind of, okay, are we willing to fail on it? And at the time, the company was doing a lot of different things. We were loaded to our gills with our success euphoria. We were running massive projects, which were very much in the style of kind of, as we call it later on, manifest destiny, where once you have committed a certain amount of capital to a game, it has to get done. It cannot fail. So, okay, are we willing to fail? And saying that is kind of easy because failure, kind of you make an error on stage and everyone laughs at you, is one test of failure. But it's very different when consequences of failure touch all the people's lives. So knowing that, running a company, when project fails, you have to lay off people, all those things. It's not a small thing when you put something in motion that you have to create the environment of willing to fail. So we wanted even more validation of it, so we took it to E3. It was still called EVR, and it was kind of a little demo we had in the corner at E3 2013. And it was like a smashing success. First, there were a few people coming, then we needed a queue, then we needed a ticketing system, and then on the final day, we were winning awards for the tech demo at E3. And this was E3 2013, where 2 major console launches were coming out. So we were kind of, okay, we believe in it, the team believes in it, our users believe in it, the industry believes in it. I think we have validated this as much as can be done with a game. So we actually announced eValkyrie later that year at Gamescom 2013, coming out, and it's later been announced for the Oculus and the PlayStation VR. So we went through an enormous amount of validation because there was kind of, we're too passionate about this, this is way too sexy, this delivers on all our childhood fantasies. We have to take a very measured approach on how we get this to market. We have it here at the show, so if you wanna learn from somebody that started doing VR way too early, we have now spent aggregate across our portfolio tens of millions of dollars, so we have it all out here. You can learn something from my talk, but going and trying it out, you would learn much more from that. You will be able to take many shortcuts, which you will only learn by trying these games out. So, do we really believe in this? I mean, is it like weird goggles, like 50 USB plugs, a camera and a thing and a driver and a, Jesus Christ, the amount of SDK versions and engine versions and engine types, etc. we have had to go through just to make this one game work? Aren't we just too early? Should we go and do more? And again, we kind of looked within the company, and there was this guy, Kevin Liu. He's in our China office, cuddling a DK2 box. This was the first time we were able to get the DK2 box over to China. It's kind of odd, they're kind of made in China, but you have to get them ordered to Iceland. I had to personally smuggle this one through Chinese customs. It's like, nothing to see here. And they had a phenomenal idea of a game, which was Eve Gun Jack, was ultimately called, originally called Nemesis. And it's like a super simple concept. It's a kind of a space shooter. You sit in one place and you shoot incoming missiles. It's kind of like Space Invaders in VR. And I remember when I looked at it, it's like, okay, this is almost painfully simple. But then kind of the whole Gear VR thing was coming about, and we could say, okay, that sounds very simple, and that needs a simple game. And maybe we could do something kind of fast and furious, which we're actually able to do, and ironically, it's coming out sooner than Valkyrie. So this game is, without, I see my PR director announcing the date, it's going to come sooner than Valkyrie. I also encourage you to try that out. It's an amazing testament to the power of what VR brings as a format to, in a way, ridiculously simple interactions, and how deep and how repetitive and how much fun you can play this very simple concept and how accessible it is. Like, you can pass the thing around in almost any kindergarten and people, and kids, they just pick it up and they know what to do. So, but one question that's also good to ask yourself is like, what am I really making? Or like, I ask myself, what are we really making? Because there are the failures of so many tech disruptions where people kind of, they live in one world and they think they can map it over to the next world. We all remember the first mobile games. They were kind of ports of existing console games, and they never really took up until something super simple like Angry Birds Swipe gameplay came to be. And then obviously we have the biggest game ever created coming later on, but they were very different. So we kind of thought about, okay, now we have this kind of early mover advantage. We have kind of the no-brainer for a sitting down experience in Valkyrie. We have kind of a super slick kind of mobile VR access, but what's going to be the second wave? And there we had another guy, actually, this is Adam Craver, who was in our Atlanta office. He had already built a VR cave prior to the Oculus Kickstarter. So he had made a projector and a bed sheet and a Microsoft Kinect and did this kind of KV sort of simulation down in his basement where he was working in VR as soon as, I think, 2011. And out of that, we created something crazy, which you really have to just go outside to try out. It's this crazy experience where you basically project your body into VR, and you get these super powerful emotions when you can hold a fireball in your hand. You can just see your own hand. You can animate your clothes because it's just video passed through into polygons. Cloth animation, if you remember how complicated that is, it just happens automatically. And that's hugely inspirational in seeing where this is going to go. And again, I encourage you to try it. It will give you different ideas of what can be done in VR. It's already kind of giving us different ideas. We've obviously shared this within the company. Everyone is trying it out, having all sorts of random ideas. And I was just in Newcastle where we're making Valkyrie. And it doesn't show well on the screen. This is an extremely early screenshot of the new kind of user interaction paradigm that we have in Valkyrie. If you've tried Valkyrie before, you know you go through the launch experience, you track missiles with your head. It's all kind of super intuitive. But to deliver a game as a service with progression, repeat gameplay for years to come, kind of Evenline style, this is something we have spent the last 2 years taking that prototype into a full-fledged game as a service. It takes a massive effort. And one of the things you need to do, you need to solve the UI paradigm. So when I'm not fighting in my spaceship, what am I really doing? Are we going to put menus and things? And we did various approaches to do carousels and menus. And it's like the weirdest thing. It just never really felt right. It was like, why have we put now a console UI inside the VR experience? And we kind of finally cracked the code. And again, just take my word for it. The picture doesn't really render it. Is that, of course, we would do AR within VR. So now we have kind of this concept, okay, it lives in the future. What would we have in the future? Well, we would have all the things that Jesse was talking about. We all had contact lenses in our brains and things, probably replacement eyeballs, God knows what. And then we would have perfect AR. So then we had to do this kind of sort of multi-dimensional sort of warp your head around it. Now we have established the reality of the game to be so real that the user interface is now AR within the VR of the game. So it's interesting how you have to kind of really sort of arrive at these patterns, and you have to arrive them in very unfortunate and unforeseen ways. I think many ways this was inspired by the work we have done on Hydra, which is the Kinect experience you would see out there. So we tend to focus a lot about, okay, what is the interaction model? I think the output model is pretty much solved by now. I think we can all imagine what perfect VR is going to be, what foveated rendering, eye tracking. Actually, eye tracking goes a little bit into input. So we think a lot about like, what is the interaction mode? What's really the interaction mode of doing a gun jack? Well, the interaction mode is really, my head is the joystick. So, okay, so that's the interaction. You're basically turning the head into a joystick. Okay, got it. Not really what you think about in the beginning, that your head is the joystick. So, okay, what are we really doing in Valkyrie? Okay, we have a controller. How can we make that work? Well, it's some sort of weird AR device. And for sure, when we do the Hydra thing, you play Disc Wars and all those things, well, then the interaction model becomes extremely simple. There's just like my body works as an input device. It's extremely empowering. So I think a lot of people are talking about the opportunity. We take a very sort of measured approach. I would love the reality to be true. That was talked about before, 8 million units by the end of 2016. If that happens, I will look like the smartest guy ever to my board of investors that were extremely skeptical about this. But we're not going to back on that. We're going to take a very measured approach. If we get to 1 to 2 million devices across all platforms next year, I think that's going to be a smashing success for the start of this. I think everything that Jesse is going to be true, was talking about is going to be true. We just have to guess the time. We have to go through our own biases of us here as the kind of innovators crowd. We're going to overestimate the first 3 years, and we're always going to underestimate the next 10 years because we're going to have these hyped up things. We're going to overextend our companies. We're going to overextend our reach. We're going to fail. We're going to die. So we will lose out when the second wave of things come out. So I would very much echo what people were saying this morning. Brace yourself for survival for next year. The people that survive the hype cycle, the very invention of backlash, then emerge with the second generation of everything that's going to play out in 2019. Those are going to be the winning strategies. That is very much what we're deploying. So we're making sure that the company is strong enough to be able to power through whatever low initial volumes we'll see, whatever media sensation about VR poisoning is going to be run, so that we will have the stamina to follow through. Because we very much want to bring this about to make a virtual world more meaningful than life. And we have a very altruistic and good reason behind it, is that I very much believe, and it was quite reinforced by the talk earlier, where we go all the way back to mirror images and cave paintings and telling stories in theater and all that. We have created something which is extremely bad, which is the consumption nature of Western capitalism, where we are forced to basically throw out as trash everything we buy into our house 6 months later, and we're programmed mostly by ourselves and media and all that for the past 100 years to consume and consume and consume. So we use the atoms of the earth to create electric signals in our brains, which we then relate to each other through concepts like rule of law and possessions and all those. None of these are real things. We can very much virtualize all of them. I think we have shown that in EVE Online, where you would ask an EVE Online player, do you care more about your Titan or your car? They would have to think about it very hard. Probably still care more about their car, but they would be willing to accept the suspension of disbelief. Because if we continue the current trajectory of having 7 billion people on the earth, if they're all going to live like us, we will need 7 Earths, or we will have what we currently live through, which is social injustice. I read an article recently, 100 million people will be displaced by global warming in the next 10 years. So what we're seeing now in Europe is just a prelude for what it's going to be. I don't think we're going to cure the disease in our brain to always want more and more and more and more. But I think we can satisfy that need in a much more sustainable way through VR. So, thank you. We have some time for questions. The guy already saving the earth in Mexico.
Hi. I'm very interested in what you mentioned by the end, to create a more sustainable real-life economy. And I believe that VR can help us in that regard. That is by, first, people can experience a lot of things using VR, and they don't have to waste a lot of resources. But more importantly, we can change their mindset, because that's what art can do. We can change their mindset into more useful, productive ideas that they would normally refuse because they're too alien for them. For example, use your bike instead of your car, use more beneficial energy instead of the usual oil. So, are you interested in using VR in order to promote this kind of good ideas, or would you recommend anything to someone who is doing that, for example, like us?
I mean, the way I think about it, and I have an interesting seat because I've watched EVE Online for 15 years, and I also lived through the economic collapse of Iceland, which is a contained social economy with its own currency system, rule of law, all that. So you saw kind of the fabric being ripped apart in front of you. So you could see how much our law, how much our money, or our economy is really a game system. It meets all the criteria of a game system, especially when more money is virtualized. You have virtualized central banks, you have virtualized banks, you have virtualized lending, you have virtualized money printing, you have virtualized consumption. Then you start to see, okay, the Western consumption economy is a poorly designed game, and I think we can make a better one. Then these things which you mentioned, gas and cars and all that, they won't really be needed because, I mean, ultimately these are things to get us to connect. I'm having to fly here to a virtual reality conference from Iceland. It's the most ironical thing that we could ever think of. If we can have this conference virtually, I think we can see that we can very much connect and share if the medium is good enough. I mean, we're not touching each other, at least not yet. So this is all like abstract sound waves and gestures and all that. We can recreate all this experience. All this togetherness we have here can be created in virtual reality. So why go and destroy the planet to have a meeting here in San Francisco? Okay, thank you.